Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure to rise today to speak to Government Motion 37, which won't surprise anybody, but I'm kind of opposed, not even kind of, very strongly opposed to this motion. So my colleagues have spoken quite a bit about the existing process that we had a debate in the House about how many seats. My colleague from Calgary Mountain View spoke extensively about how the government used their majority to approve 89 seats and approve the criteria by which the Boundaries Commission would discuss to create the Boundaries Report. That commission then spent quite a lot of time consulting with Albertans, thousands of Albertans, over an interim report and then the final report. And then that's the report that has been presented to this House that now apparently isn't good enough or is flawed or doesn't have enough seats or, oh, I don't know, whatever. My point, though, Mr. Speaker, is that there is a process in place for this discussion. And that process has been appreciated and understood by every single member of this House, not just who is sitting in this House right now, but who has sat in this House previously. And that's really important, Mr. Speaker, because following that standard process and those standard protocols in the context of boundaries, I think is really important. That it's following that standard process that guarantees the independence of the Boundaries Commission and guarantees the removal of politics from the designation of riding boundaries. We cannot have politicians choosing their voters and drawing lines on the map. It is not what we are here to do. We are here to work with the boundaries as designed by the Boundary Commission based on the input from Albertans, and we're here to do the best that we can to be the MLA of those ridings as they are drawn. But what's disturbing to me is that the government, the UCP, does not want to follow these standard processes or practices. And that is what is really in question here. They don't like the results of the majority report for whatever reason, and so they want to put their thumb on the scale and influence a different outcome. And that's what gerrymandering is. It is politicians putting their thumb on the scale and choosing how riding boundaries should be drawn to increase the chances of some kind of outcome. In this case, a UCP majority. And what's disturbing about that for me, Mr. Speaker, is that the idea of free and fair elections and effective representation is really foundational to our democracy. We have a representative democracy. I am standing here representing 55,000 people that live in Banff-Kananaskis. Those 55,000 people can't be here today, fortunately. That would take a really long time. So I'm here as their voice. So when my constituents reach out to me to share their concerns, it's my responsibility to reflect those concerns in the House. I tell my constituents all the time that it doesn't matter how they voted. I am their MLA, and it is my responsibility to represent them. And so for me, this conversation isn't a partisan one because it's not actually about how people vote. It's about making sure that every MLA has a riding boundary that makes sense, that they can best represent their people in this place. This motion represents the most anti-democratic action ever taken by this government, and I'm quite disturbed by it. And it also represents the latest example of the government ignoring input from the public and ignoring the results of public consultation. We've seen that with the RCMP, the Canada Pensions, dividing healthcare into 4 ministries, using the notwithstanding clause 4 times, the education curriculum, privatizing healthcare, banning books in libraries, overreaching municipal decision-making and property taxes, water management with interbasin transfers, and so much more. There are many, many examples of this government not listening to the results of public consultation. And every single one of those times, Mr. Speaker, people from the Alberta public volunteered their time and their expertise and their energy to share their input. And how insulting is it that that input is just thrown by the wayside as if it didn't matter? But it matters to the people who participated. This motion around changing the majority report is just the latest example because it ignores the work of the non-partisan Boundary Commission by literally cherry-picking one sentence that seems to justify the whole ridiculousness of the conversation that we're having right now. This motion also wastes $1.5 million that's already been spent on this endeavour. I don't know about you, we talk a lot about affordability in the House, Mr. Speaker, and how hard it is for Albertans just to put food on the table and pay rent, and yet somehow we can waste $1.5 million on a report that we're not even going to use. And then the Premier talks about, oh, well, she'll just find more money to fund Elections Alberta for what is becoming a very intense timeline. I think any time we ignore the expertise and input from thousands of Albertans, the very first words out of our mouths should be, I'm sorry. I'm sorry we wasted your time, because really all we wanted to do was draw the maps ourselves. Why isn't the government saying that? Because that's actually the truth. The Premier told the Commission to consider 89 seats based on the results of a debate that we had in this House already. And now she wants to change her mind because she doesn't like the boundaries that the Commission created. The Premier and the members opposite say that this is for better rural representation. Okay, sure. I like to believe that all Albertans, whether they live in urban or rural ridings, are best represented when they are grouped with similar communities. The minority report that has small urban areas with large rural spaces actually risks weakening rural issues and votes. And I'll give you an example from my own personal experience. I now am in the Banff-Kananaskis riding, but it used to be the riding of Banff-Cochrane. That is a large population base in Cochrane, surrounded by a large rural landscape, and I lived in one of the smaller communities of Canmore. I can tell you during that time that we were Banff-Cochrane, the people in the Bow Valley often felt disenfranchised by voting. They felt that their votes didn't matter because we were constantly overshadowed by the population and the issues of Cochrane, which always felt more pressing than what was happening in the Bow Valley. Even when we had an MLA from Canmore in this House, our issues were still overshadowed by Cochrane because they were the bigger population and their issues were perceived to be more important. This is why when we create these ridings, it's about grouping similar communities together, Mr. Speaker, just as much as it's about population. The UCP wants to pretend that all of rural Alberta is the same and we just need to have more representation for rural Alberta. I disagree. I think we need to have better representation and more effective representation for all Albertans. To sit here and pretend that all of rural Alberta is the same is poppycock. Every community in this province is unique and different and has different opportunities and challenges and things to offer the provincial economy and our provincial culture. So we can't paint rural Alberta with one brush. We need to think about this as communities. The Minority Report links Nanton with Banff and Canmore. Has anybody asked the community of Nanton how they feel about that, Mr. Speaker? We did. They don't like it. Okay, just so you know. Also, Diamond Valley doesn't want to be in with Canmore. When I was presenting to the Electoral Boundaries Commission, Mr. Speaker, they asked me how I felt about Canmore being in with the Crow's Nest Pass. And my answer to the Electoral Boundaries Commission was simple. It doesn't matter what I think. I will be the best MLA that I can be for my riding, whatever the shape and size of my riding. What matters is how the people think. And the people clearly provided abundant input on the interim report, and that input was reflected in the final majority report, and that should be the end of this debate. We should just be accepting the final report. Riding boundaries in the majority report were drawn based on the input of thousands of Albertans who provided details of their unique communities. The chair, as part of that majority, recommended adoption of the majority report in its totality. Now the UCP wants to pretend that that isn't the actual report, that the addendum is the report, or the minority report is the report. Well, I don't know. There's only one majority report, Mr. Speaker. It is the one that was approved by the majority of the Commission. To say that they're listening to the chair's recommendations when they're only choosing to listen to one is disingenuous. Rural Albertans definitely deserve effective representation, just as urban Albertans do. And the Boundary Commission did that. I listened to the member opposite talk extensively about how his riding is so big and he has to fly to places and it's difficult to connect with all of his constituents, and I sympathize. My riding is also very large. I spend a lot of time in my car. I don't have to fly to any communities to connect with constituents, but I will say that I put a lot of miles on my vehicle, Mr. Speaker, trying to connect with the people across Banff-Kananaskis. I don't think that adding 2 more rural seats and changing the map is going to help me do my job better, because my job as a rural MLA is to find ways to connect with my people. And also, we had an opportunity to share all of that with the Boundary Commission. And if you didn't, oh well, I did. I went twice. I talked extensively about every community in my riding. I provided recommendations for future MLAs, and I provided recommendations for the Boundary Commission to consider. And I'm proud of that work that I did. And I'm proud of the report that the Boundaries Commission did, because they didn't just take my word for it. They talked to other people in Banff-Kananaskis and other people across Alberta to create the majority report. And that is what that report is based on. If the members opposite are concerned about effective representation for rural areas, Mr. Speaker, they should follow me for more tips, because I have a lot of ways that I connect with my rural constituents. I do it in person, I do it online, I do it in a coffee shop, I do it at a community barbecue, I go for hikes with people, I go for boat rides with people, I go for dog walks, and I meet people literally on the side of the road as they're passing through my riding. There are a million ways that you can connect with your constituents, and the shape and size of your riding should not necessarily influence how well you do your job. What influences how well you do your job is the effort you put in. So I don't need a different shaped riding to do better. I'm pretty awesome. I do great. I am, thank you. I am pretty great. The one thing about this that is the most important thing to remember is that politics does not belong in this conversation. How we feel as politicians doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you think it's fair or hard or easy or whatever, because the Boundary Commission already considered all of that. And they created the majority report, which we are here to accept and then move forward with our jobs, which is representing our constituents. So in closing, Mr. Speaker, I just want to say the UCP should keep their noses out of the boundaries, first. Second, I just want to thank the Boundaries Commission, because I think it's really hard work. And I think about how difficult it would be to weigh all of the different views and perspectives that they heard to create the majority report, and to really think about each of these boundaries and the communities, and trying to make sure that population growth and effective representation and urban and rural ridings are represented. That is no easy task, and they did a phenomenal job traveling the province, talking to thousands of Albertans, and I want to thank them, because I think this is really hard work, and they did it really well while maintaining their independence and creating ridings that served the people, not that served those of us in this room. I have a large riding, and I can't be everywhere all the time, and I know that many of the members opposite are the same. But I also encourage the members opposite to reflect on times when their riding boundary was different, because changing from Banff-Canmore to Banff-Kananaskis changed everything for the people in my riding. It suddenly made people think that their votes mattered, their individual vote counted, that it was worth reaching out to their MLA to have a conversation because their issues were important. And that is what we are talking about here, Mr. Speaker. We're talking about making sure that people feel represented, that they can reach out to their MLA, and the majority report from the Boundaries Commission does that. Thank you.